So Lifebox is a global non-profit organization, and its aim is to make surgery and anesthesia safer worldwide. And it's probably worth telling you a little bit about its background. Uh, it was founded in 2011, but it actually grew out of an initiative from the World Federation of Societies of Anesthesiologists that began in a World Congress of Anesthesia in 2004 in Paris, where the Quality and Safety Committee of that organization held a workshop, and people were basically putting up things on whiteboards and brainstorming what would be worthwhile doing. And there were about 50 people in the room, and one of them, and I've lost track of who it was, made the point that there were many operating rooms in the world that did not have pulse oximetry. Now, what you've got to understand is that if you don't have a pulse oximeter, you don't have much. It is in a way a symbol of being very under-resourced. And from that, we began a project called the Global Oximetry Project, run by WFSA, which was a proof of concept that we could create, that we could provide a useful, usable pulse oximeter that would make a difference to people. And that proof of concept in 4 countries was very successful. And then working with Professor Atul Gawande and the WHO in the development of the WHO checklist, we decided to bring the initiatives together and form something called Lifebox. And the 4 organizations involved were the Association of Anaesthetists of Great Britain and Ireland, the Brigham and Women's Hospital, the Harvard Chan School of Public Health, and the World Federation of Societies of Anesthesiologists. Now, the Lifebox approach is, I think, quite well thought through. There are 3 basic pillars, and I think these apply quite generally, really. One is the promotion of teamwork. We've actually chosen surgical infection as a key element of surgical safety. And then at the center is improvement of anesthesia safety. And something that may not be very well understood is that in many parts of the world, I mean, we've heard that 5 billion of the 7 billion people in the world don't have access to safe anesthesia and surgery, but the state of anesthesia provision is typically way worse than the state of surgery provision. Typically, anesthesia is provided not by doctors, not by nurses, but by technical people, often with as little as a year or even less of formal training, working with equipment and medications that specialist anesthetists like myself would find difficult to give a safe anesthetic with. And the mortality rate from anesthesia in those circumstances is hundreds or even thousands times higher than it is in Australia and New Zealand. I mean, it's worth reflecting on how fortunate we are in Australia and New Zealand. I think we tend to say that our surgery and anesthesia services are amongst the best in the world. They're certainly equal to the best in the world. I don't know anywhere where across the board they're better. And I think it's very easy to just lose sight of the huge difference that you see when you look elsewhere. Now, across those 3 pillars is a surgical safety checklist, which you may not know much about, but it is essentially a tool to promote teamwork as well as checks within the operating room and to improve communication. And it's underpinned by research and evaluation. And then at the heart is the idea of advocacy, because if we're going to make a difference in the long term, we can't do this by continually giving things to people. We have to get governments to actually understand the right way to spend their healthcare budgets to actually address their own problems. So the checklist is at the heart of what we do, and I think it continues to be a cornerstone of all aspects of our work, because many aspects of the checklist are about both anesthesia and surgical safety, and particularly the infectious side of surgical safety. Actually, the reason that the pulse oximeter was included on the checklist when it was designed was to give a message to those operating rooms or the systems in the world that didn't have it, about how important it was. It's actually so routine in places like the US, like Australia, and like New Zealand, that you wouldn't put it on the checklist normally. But that was a deliberate decision to give a strong signal about the importance of that technology, but more importantly, of anesthesia in general. And so to address what we had worked out was a gap of some 77,000 operating rooms that didn't have pulse oximetry, we developed this oximeter, or at least we developed it in conjunction with a small Taiwanese company called ACare. And the thing about this is that it is a good enough oximeter for me to use in Auckland, or indeed I would be completely happy for it to be used on my family or myself. It is in fact ISO compliant, but it goes above and beyond the standards of most comparable oximeters in our part of the world. It's designed, for example, that it can be dropped from a meter and it won't break. You may not be aware, but many portable oximeters, they either have a rechargeable battery or can run off power, but they don't run directly off power. They actually run directly off their battery. So if the battery goes flat, you can't plug them in and start using them immediately. This one works independently off power or off the battery. And in fact, as well as its rechargeable battery, it can be powered by A3 batteries. So it's very versatile. And there are many features of it which make it better than the average high-income country oximeter. And we brought the price of this oximeter down from nearly $1,000 for comparable, not as good, oximeters to $250 US. Now, people often say, well, you can get a cheaper oximeter than that, but you can't get one of this quality. And I think a key message of our work is that we are trying to give the highest quality care that we can to people. We're not trying to donate hand-me-downs or leftover equipment. This is really trying to improve the standard of care properly. I want to acknowledge Lifebox in Australia and New Zealand. This was brought together by the College of Anaesthetists, the Society of Anaesthetists in each country, and by Interplast. And they formed a group that can actually manage the process of raising money and distributing it for worthwhile projects. And it has been very active in raising and distributing money. On this slide, I've listed just some of the projects that have been done by this group and through this group. And it's a very active and hugely effective contribution to the global work of Lifebox. One of the things I've been particularly pleased about is that with the advent of COVID, most organizations have had to hunker down, reduce their staff, and basically go into a sort of hibernation type of mode to try and survive. Lifebox succeeded in pivoting and focusing on actually being part of addressing the problem of COVID. And of course, oximetry is central to diagnosing COVID-19, to diagnosing COVID, because very often people become quite hypoxemic, but because their CO2 levels are normal, they don't look distressed. And it's only really by checking their pulse, their blood oxygen levels, that you realize just quite how bad they are. And of course, then in the management of them, in the therapy for them, oximetry is also pivotal. We managed to get an extra 5,000 pulse oximeters to distribute to high-risk COVID regions. We developed a decision-making tool for triaging patients. We developed a COVID-related checklist, and we've provided many virtual grand round presentations to assist in education. Now, obviously, all of this work is only possible with the help of our donors and funders, and thank you so much for supporting us through this initiative today. Thank you, and those who have donated to support it in the Asian Pacific region and indeed globally. It's easy to find Lifebox. Actually, if you just Google it, you'll go to the website, and it's a worthwhile website to look at. And if you want to follow our work and get in touch with us, there are some useful links. So finally, thank you, very much appreciated, and thank you for the good work that you're doing.
Thank you so much, Professor Mary.